The first true thing is this: I paid for a trip I wasn't invited to. 3 years of spare dollars tucked into envelopes and a savings account with my name on it, groceries clipped into coupons, shoes repaired instead of replaced, lights turned off like prayers, so my family could fly to Hawaii and remember we were still a family after my husband died. The night before we were supposed to leave, my phone buzzed with a sentence that took my breath without raising its voice: "Mom, you're not coming. She wants this to be only her family." She. My daughter-in-law. My son used to call me Mama when he needed the car keys. Now he called me Mom when he needed distance. My name is Ellen Grace Morales, but most people in our part of California know me as Ellie, because grief makes names smaller and easier to carry. I'm a widow. I am the kind of woman who saves hotel points like rosary beads and knows every happy hour by daylight and price. I had a plan. We would fly to Oahu in the last week of August, stand in the water that held us when my husband was stationed there, and say his name without it breaking anything. The flight numbers were memorized. The sunscreen sat by the door in a little basket labeled beach. And then the sentence came, and the trip became a mirror I could finally see myself in. I did not reply right away. Words are like doors, you learn which ones swing back and hit you. I put the phone on the counter next to the coffee maker that still smells faintly like his mornings and the ceramic sugar jar my sister says is tacky and I say is mine. The house held its breath. The clock on the stove turned one more minute into proof that time can move even when people don't. You want to know why I didn't call him and beg or scream? I could have. I have begged before, in emergency rooms, at counters where people wear name tags and power differently, to the universe when the ache in my chest wouldn't listen to reason. But this was not an emergency. It was a revelation. I had been financing a life I wasn't allowed to live inside. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a person who has forgotten you are a person is to let them find out. I walked through the rooms the way you do the last week you live in a house, touching edges, blessing light switches, thanking door frames for not giving out when grief leaned on them. I put on my husband's denim shirt because it still carries a whisper of him, like a weather report you can trust. I boiled water and missed him so fiercely I had to sit down. You would laugh, I told his chair. You would say, "Ellie, you always wanted a sign. Here it is." He would laugh. He laughed at everything a notch quieter than other men, as if joy were a secret between us that no one else had earned. I met my husband on a hot day in a cold grocery store in Oceanside. He held up a cantaloupe and told me it talked. It's saying pick me, I'm the only sweet thing in aisle 6. I said that was a bold claim for a melon. He said I was a bold claim for a Wednesday. He was the kind of man who checked tire pressure on the cars of women he barely knew and called his mother every Sunday without needing to be told. He died between holidays, which is where most ordinary people die, and the calendar has not recovered since. Afterward, my son and his wife said, "Let's do something big together, Mom. Let's honor him." Hawaii was my husband's laughter. It was where we ate shaved ice too fast and got headaches that felt like the ocean making room in our skulls. I said yes. I started saving the way a person prays when she's not sure she remembers how. I saved quietly. I am 70, but I still hide bills and cookbooks like an accomplice. I took the early bus and walked home to save the transfer. I sold the china no one uses and bought a cooler that fits in an overhead bin. Every time the account grew, I pictured the shoreline and my son's arm around my shoulders and my daughter-in-law handing me a towel like we were all on the same page of the same book. I told my church ladies the barest part, we're going to Hawaii. They hugged me like I had already been. Then came the text. Then came the silence where an apology should have been. Then came the second text, not from my son but from her, "We'll reimburse you for your flight. Please don't make this bigger than it is." Bigger than it is. I sat with that sentence the way you sit with a relative who never stops talking, you let it tire itself out. I opened my laptop and looked at the account. My name on the header. My deposits lined up like little rail ties on a track that now led to nowhere I was invited. I did something I have never done in my life. I picked up my purse, found my bank card, and drove to the branch while my hands shook and the truth didn't. "Ms. Morales," the banker said, gentle like I might be returning a dress. "How can I help you?" I said, "I need to freeze the account." He asked if there had been fraud. I said, "Yes. The kind where a woman pays for a dream she is not allowed to attend." He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He looked at my face like it was a document he needed to read correctly the first time. "We can put a hold pending review," he said, "since it's solely in your name." Solely. That word was a light turning on. At the airport, they must have stood in the line where families fidget and luggage pretends to be lighter than it is. They must have texted me when the card declined, when the tickets glitched, when the meal plan code read "not authorized." They called. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter like a carnival I didn't buy tickets for. I stirred my tea and let it ring. I let it all ring until the house learned the sound and lost its surprise. Do you think silence is revenge? I don't. That night my silence was a boundary arriving right on time. If you're listening and you hear your own breath shortening because you remember a time you were the wallet and not the welcome, tell me one small sentence you wish you'd said. Leave it below. Your words might be the hinge somebody else needs tonight. If you want to stay with me through the rest, you can subscribe. We keep a little porch light on here for anyone who got left off a group text and still wants to live. I grew up in Central California where the air in August can hold you by the throat and the almonds never apologize for how much water they drink. My mother's way of loving was to keep everyone fed. My father's was to fix what broke. Mine was to remember who liked white bread and who needed the crusts cut off, to show up with soup when the woman down the hall didn't admit she wanted any. I married a man who made the world feel like a reasonable place to stand. We had one son and one easy decade, and then the economy caught his job by the ankle and shook until the ladder rattled. We made it anyway. He got sick anyway. Cancer is an editor with bad taste. After he died, people sent flowers that played dead well and cards signed by families who had never used the word widow in a sentence with my name before. My son said I could move in, and I thanked him and said I would keep my little apartment with the bad light and the reliable neighbors, because grief likes home court advantage. My daughter-in-law said, "You'll come for dinner every Sunday," and I did. I brought rolls. I washed dishes like a penance. I watched her move around the kitchen like a teacher's pet in God's classroom. She was capable and tidy and hungry for compliments. I gave them to her in portions I could afford. The first time I realized I was a guest in a room where my name used to be on the lease was a Wednesday when I offered to take my grandson to the park and she said, "We're actually keeping activities immediate family only right now." Immediate. I looked down at my hands and thought of all the things they had held that counted as family: fevers, report cards, mortgage checks signed twice, my husband's head when he asked me to pray in a voice that made the room look away. I smiled the way women smile when they don't want their face to tell on their heart. "Of course," I said. And I meant it, and I didn't. The Hawaii Fund started as a hope and turned into a job. I labeled envelopes like they were employees. Airfare. Hotel. Car. Luau. Snorkel, maybe. When the balance reached a number that looked like a good risk, I booked. I put everything under my name because I remembered how airlines try to turn mistakes into your fault. I thought I was being responsible. I thought adult children were still children who want you beside them when the water is bigger than their confidence. Hope was chewing with its mouth open. I let it. When the exclusion came, I did what women like me do: I cleaned. I wiped down a counter that didn't need it. I vacuumed the rug I bought 30 years ago from a man who swore it was hand-knotted by God himself. I folded dish towels like soldiers and put them in the drawer on their best behavior. Then I called 6 women who had never asked me for more than a ride to the doctor and a recipe for lemon bars. They were the women you nod to at church and at the pharmacy and in the produce aisle when avocados are acting pricey and everyone wants to feel like the price of things is not a personal insult. "Are you free next week?" I asked. "Can you find a swimsuit you don't hate? Do you have a hat?" They laughed and said what women say, "I can't afford it and I'm too old for that and my knees and my arms and my everything." I said, "The money is handled. Pack the sunscreen. We leave Tuesday." Let me tell you who they are so they won't be anonymous in a story that would rather you focus on the people who forgot me. Norma is 78, a retired bus driver with a jawline that doesn't know how to quit. Her grandkids moved 2 states away and call her on speaker when their mother remembers she has a mother. Laverne is 80 and still sews for people who think custom means cheap. She makes dresses that can hold a woman together when the day tries to pull her apart. Sunita runs the neighborhood watch like a general with a sense of humor. Her son hasn't visited since the year before the pandemic turned into a personality test. Bea keeps a notebook of every book she's ever read and writes in pencil because she likes the sound it makes. Teresa hums when she cooks and feeds half the building and has never been asked to sit at any table that didn't need her casserole more than it needed her company. And Mrs. Sue, who still signs letters with her married name 50 years later because grief for her is a lake that got comfortable. We flew like women who had never expected to be carried again. On the plane, we cried privately and laughed publicly and ate the tiny cookies like communion. Hawaii opened its hand. The air smelled like something I had forgotten and had been missing, a sweetness that doesn't apologize. When our feet hit the sand, we did what no one expects older women to do. We ran, badly and gloriously, and the water let us in. At the hotel, the clerk looked at us and smiled like the island does when it sees you're trying to be good. "Welcome, ladies," he said, "we've put you all on the same floor with the ocean view." I had paid for that view. I had paid with lunchtime apples and unpurchased sweaters and 3 years of saying no, thank you to anything that wasn't the trip. It did not feel like revenge to stand on that balcony with women who had learned to live on the quiet side of gratitude. It felt like justice with sunscreen on. If you've ever bought a ticket to your own absence, tell me below how you took your seat back. 1 sentence. 1 small miracle. If this story feels like the kind of thing you want to hear to keep going, you can follow along. We don't do shouting here. We do truth, and the sound of waves that know more than we do. We learned the island the way you learn a neighbor, by walking past it with kindness. Mornings, we met the ocean when it was still waking up and the surfers were writing their names in cursive on the horizon. Norma kept time with a wristwatch that had seen 4 presidents and 1 husband. She told us bus stories that made strangers on the sand lean in. Laverne let the sun stitch warmth into the arthritic places the doctor can name but cannot fix. Sunita organized our towels by color like a landing strip and made friends with every lifeguard in a mile radius. Bea and I took turns reading out loud from a paperback that smelled like old houses, and Teresa brought snacks that should have cost more than they did and wouldn't let anyone be hungry for even a minute. Mrs. Sue walked the edge where the water decides things and told the air about a marriage that began with a borrowed suit and a toast in 3 languages. We went to the farmer's market and sampled what people mean when they say fruit without being specific. A man with a smile shaped like good trouble cut us slivers of pineapple so sweet I thought it was showing off. We bought lays that made the room smell like a wedding without a bride. A woman our age who had never learned to be stingy with her joy taught us to say mahalo with our chests, not just our mouths. We learned. We said it to the island, to the maid who folded the ends of the toilet paper pointy like a confidence trick, to the family who asked if we would take their photo and then said, "You all look so happy," like happiness and age were not on speaking terms. On Tuesday, we rode a bus out to a lookout where the wind thinks it's in charge. We didn't climb too far because knees tell the truth even when bravado plays the music too loud. We stood and let the wind put its hands in our hair like a grandmother who refuses to admit she's showing off. Sunita cried without hiding it. "I didn't know I was still a person who could be blown away," she said, and we all nodded, because it turns out the body can forget and remember in the same week. We took a beginner's hula class in a park where the shade made promises and kept them. The teacher was a woman with ankles like music and a face with all the weather in it. She told us the hips are not the point, the story is, and we moved like books nobody had checked out in years finally getting read. A little girl watched us and clapped like she had never seen older women pretend to be mountains and rain at the same time. Again, she said, and we again ed until we had nothing left but good tired. That night we sat on the balcony and listened to the water keep its appointment with the shore. The phone rang. My son. I watched it vibrate and light up and go still. Then it buzzed again with a message. Mom, I don't know why you're doing this. We're at the gate. We can't check in at the hotel. She's furious. You're making me look bad. I passed the phone to B, who reads for a living, and let her read the words out loud into the night air so they could have a proper audience. When she got to "You're making me look bad," 9 birds on a wire lifted off at once and the whole world punctuated the sentence for me. I wrote back 4 words I'd been practicing since the bank: "This is my boundary." Then I put the phone face down, like a book we could pick up later if we wanted to risk the ending. He wrote again. Mom. Be reasonable. I laughed the way a woman laughs when a stranger tells her to smile. Reasonable had done its best for years. Reasonable had held me together with tape. Reasonable had allowed me to foot the bill and then sit quietly to the side so the photo looked tidy. Reasonable was tired. I let it sleep. I wrote, "We'll talk when I'm back," and added a period that felt like a gate closing. The next morning, the island blessed our stubbornness with rain that didn't last. We drove to a beach where the lifeguard looked like he had been carved from someone's idea of summer and the water made 100 small promises and kept most of them. Teresa, who swears she cannot float, floated. Mrs. Sue, who says she doesn't sing since he died, sang along to a song we didn't know and somehow knew. Laverne stood up in the water and held her arms out like she was trying on wings. Norma took a photo of us and said, "Proof. Proof is what women our age collect instead of apologies." A man selling shave ice showed us how to order like locals: ice first, then syrup, then the condensed milk if you have the nerve. We had the nerve. We sat with blue tongues and red lips and laughed like teenagers who know adulthood is watching but can't catch them. Sunita said, "Do you think this is what family feels like?" And for the first time in a long time, I answered a question with yes, without measuring my voice. If you're watching this and something in you is sitting up straight because you were left out of a plan you paid for, money, time, attention, tell me one thing you did for yourself anyway. Put it in the comments. I want this to be a place where women like us collect each other's courage. If that's something you need more of, you can subscribe. We'll keep the kettle on and the porch light steady. On Thursday morning, my son sent a photo of my grandson sitting on a suitcase, small and patient, like children are taught to be when adults arrange the weather. He misses you, the text said, as if the sentence were a key and I was a lock with no say in it. I miss him every day. Missing is not a currency, it's a climate. I wrote back, "Tell him I love him. Tell him I'll call him when we're home," and I put the phone away, because love is not an excuse to light yourself on fire so other people can warm their hands. We took the bus to a small town where the trees held hands over the street and the bakery smelled like the way grandmothers remember their kitchens. The woman at the counter, our age and a little younger in the eyes, asked where we were from and we said California, and she said, "Oh, the place with 10 kinds of weather in one block and rent that thinks it's royalty." We liked her immediately. We bought malasadas and sat on a bench that had seen better paint, and Mrs. Sue told us how she came over on a boat that listened to the ocean more than the captain and fell in love while peeling shrimp in a kitchen that paid cash because it paid shame. She laughed at herself and cried for him and none of us tried to make it neat. In the afternoon we visited a taro patch where a man with hands like instructions taught us the difference between growing and forcing. "A plant knows," he said. "It remembers water." I thought of my life and the way I had tried to irrigate other people's fields with savings that had my name on them. I thought of how kindness can be a pipeline and a drain. I thought of the day I would go home and sit across from my son and speak to him like a woman who had stopped auditioning for a part she already owned. That night, on the balcony, the 6 of them gave me a gift I did not know I needed. They told me what they would have said if the text had been sent to them. "No," said Sunita, as if the word were a recipe she could teach. "Absolutely not," said Norma, who has escorted drunk men off buses and home in the same hour. "Sweetheart, bless your heart, but no," said Laverne in a voice that could hem a storm. "Tell me you're joking," said B, "and then tell me again when I don't laugh." "I'm busy not funding my own erasure," said Teresa. Mrs. Sue squeezed my hand and said nothing, which was the truest answer of all. On the last day, we woke before sunrise and drove with 100 other strangers to watch the sky practice its scales. The wind at the summit did what it wanted. We wrapped sweaters around shoulders that have carried reputations and losses, and the grocery bags no one else wanted to carry. The sun came up like a secret we'd been trusted with. I said my husband's name into the cold and it didn't break anything. It put itself back into my mouth like something I can keep. At the airport, the woman at the counter weighed our bags and our faces and decided we were exactly the right amount. "Did you enjoy your stay?" she asked. I said we did what we came to do, which was not to see sights or take tours but to be seen. She stamped our papers like a notary of joy. When I got home, the house opened its arms. I set my suitcase by the door and put a shell on the windowsill like a permission slip to keep listening to water. My son called 3 times in an hour, then once more at midnight, then left a voice message with his anger folded into politeness. "You hurt us," he said. "She is devastated. We had to come home. You owe us the difference." Oh. The way people choose that word when they've forgotten the first math you teach a child: if you take from someone, you say thank you and please. If you hurt someone with what you took, you say I'm sorry and you try to learn. We met at a coffee shop with a view that tried too hard. He arrived late. He hugged me without letting his chest touch mine, which is how people hug when they are performing affection for an audience that isn't there. "Mom," he said, "why did you do that?" I stirred my coffee like it was a patient. "Why did you tell me not to come on a trip I paid for?" He looked away. He said the phrase that has ended whole rooms: she just wanted it to be her family. I kept my voice gentle. "I am your family." He said I take things too personally. I smiled the way I did when he was 5 and insisted the sky was green because the park said so. He asked for reimbursement like he was reading a menu. I let the request sit on the table until it cooled. "No," I said, not because I was angry, anger would have been easier to fight, but because I was done underwriting the story where I don't exist. He told me I was choosing money over family. I told him I was choosing dignity over theater. He told me I would die alone. I told him I already had and survived. He put his hands on his knees the way he did as a boy when he didn't get picked for the team he wanted and said, "So that's it," and I said, "That's it for this conversation." I went home and called my grandson. We talked about dinosaurs and why some words feel bigger in your chest. I told him I was proud of how he waits his turn even when it's hard. He said, "I'm good at waiting. Daddy says I got that from you." I said, "I hope you also got my laugh." He laughed. I cried for the first time since the bakery. Then I made lemon bars for the ladies, because celebration is a muscle and I want to keep mine strong. If you have ever had to choose peace over the performance of family, tell me the smallest thing that helped you do it. One word. One habit. Put it below. And if this circle feels like the kind of company you want to keep, subscribe. We are not collecting numbers here, we're collecting breath. The weeks after felt like the inside of a bell, one true note, ringing. I woke up, named 3 facts, and let coffee do what it can. The cup is warm. The window is open. The light is kind. Sometimes I add a 4th, the money I earn serves me first. I stopped apologizing for being careful. I stopped paying to enter rooms where my chair had already been removed. I sent postcards to the women with photos of something silly, the shave ice in its ridiculous glory, the chickens strutting around like celebrities, and wrote, "We did it. We did." On Sundays, I sit in the back pew and whisper yes under hymns I've known since I had braids. The pastor talks about the prodigal son and I think about daughters who never get a parable. I light a candle for my husband and thank him for teaching me that love fixes what it can and refuses to pretend about what it can't. I do not pray for my son to come back as much as I pray for him to become. That is a different prayer, and it lets me breathe. I see my grandson in public places and private arrangements. We have picnic dinners in parks where the geese act entitled and the sunset minds its business. We build Lego cities that respect zoning. We treat the library like a cathedral and whisper even when we don't have to. I do not talk about money with him because children deserve to have childhoods and not account ledgers. When he asks why we didn't go to Hawaii together, I say, grown-ups forget how to share sometimes, and we practice by splitting an orange cleanly. Some afternoons I walk to the senior center where a bulletin board tries to be relevant and dance classes promise joints they cannot deliver. I pin a flyer for the aunties, a group I made up and then made real, older women who plan small trips with large joy. No dues. Bring your shoes. We go where the bus will take us. We've gone to the aquarium like we were kids again and let jellyfish teach us how to float with intentions. We've taken the ferry and stood at the rail like captains who decided to be kind. We've ridden the trolley and waved at tourists waving at us. It turns out family is a verb when you're brave enough to conjugate it. My son writes occasionally. The messages are tidy, the way you arrange a drawer when company is coming. I read them. I answer when answering is kind to me. I do not explain the boundary to him again. Boundaries ruin when you handle them too much. He asked once more for reimbursement, and I replied with the simplest math I own. I used the money for exactly what it was meant for, family. He didn't write for a while. Then he sent a photo of my grandson at a school play, dressed like a star. I wrote back, "So are you, kid." I meant both of them. On my kitchen shelf sits the little basket labeled beach. Inside are 2 shells, a hotel key I forgot to turn in, and 6 folded notes from the women, thank yous that read like vows to themselves. I will buy the right peach. I will ask for the window seat. I will keep my name on my own account. I will stop apologizing for the space I take. I will say no before my body says it for me. I will remember the taste of the ocean when I doubt what I deserve. I open the notes on days when the old script tries to audition again. I say, we've already cast this play. Do you think there is a right way to be a mother when your child becomes a stranger to your dignity? I don't. There are 100 ways, most of them quiet and unphotographed. You keep your promises to the small, watching eyes. You give your money a job that includes you. You take women who have been waiting all their lives somewhere they didn't know was still allowed. You let your silence be a sentence that ends with love, for yourself, for the people who stood when you called, even for the ones who forget and might one day remember. If this story put a hand on your back and helped you stand up straighter, leave a word so the next person knows how to find us. Here, enough, still. If you want to keep this porch light on with me, subscribe. Not for numbers. For company. For the quiet relief of hearing someone say what you have lived and knowing you are not the only one. At night I put my husband's shirt over the chair because it looks like a man about to sit down and tell me a joke. I wash the coffee pot and leave it gleaming because morning is a promise you can keep with soap and water. I check the lock without apology, not because I'm afraid but because I'm in charge. I look at the little basket labeled beach and feel the ocean uncurl in my chest. The cup is warm. The window is open. The light is kind. I am the person I invited.